The torpedo tubes were flooded. The crew was silent. Every man aboard USS Batfish knew they were being hunted, but they had no orders to run. It was April 1945. The war in the Pacific was supposed to be winding down. The Japanese Navy was broken. The supply lines were choked. And yet, deep beneath the South China Sea, a small American submarine was creeping through water black as oil, stalking a target that the United States government would spend the next 2 decades pretending never existed. The captain gave the order in a whisper. The crew held their breath. And somewhere above them, the ship they were about to destroy carried a secret so dangerous that its sinking would be erased from every official record filed in Washington. It starts, like most true stories of war, with something bureaucratic. A memo, a classified routing order. In February 1945, American Signals Intelligence, the same network that had cracked Japanese naval codes and turned the tide at Midway, intercepted a transmission that set off alarm bells at the highest levels of the Pacific Command. The Japanese were moving something. Not troops, not weapons. Something far more valuable and far more terrifying. The details of what exactly was being transported would remain classified for over 40 years. But the order that came down from Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz's command was unambiguous. Intercept, engage, and leave no survivors. And then never speak of it again. The submarine assigned to the mission was the USS Perch II, a Belau-class boat that had been refitted in late 1944 for special operations. She was not a glamorous vessel. She was a working boat, scarred by patrol through the Philippines and the Banda Sea. Her crew of 72 men had seen enough war to distrust the kind of mission that came without paperwork. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Blish Carter, received his orders verbally. Nothing was written down. The rendezvous coordinates were given by hand signal on a dock in Subic Bay from an officer Carter had never met before and would never see again. That alone told Carter everything he needed to know. This was not a standard patrol. This was a ghost operation. By March of 1945, USS Perch II was running silent in waters between Hainan Island and the Vietnamese coast. She was operating in a corridor the Japanese still controlled, a stretch of ocean where American submarines had been lost without trace in the months before. The crew were told they were hunting a munitions transport. They were not told the truth. And that truth was already aboard the Japanese vessel they were tracking. A vessel designated in Imperial Navy logs only by the code name Tokushima Maru. No manifest, no official registry. In Tokyo's naval records, she simply did not exist. What we know now, pieced together from declassified NSA intercepts, fragmentary Japanese naval archives recovered in 1976, and the private testimony of 2 surviving Perch II crew members given to a historian in the 1990s, is that Tokushima Maru was carrying a research team. Not soldiers, scientists. Some of the same scientists who had worked within Unit 731, Imperial Japan's most secret and most savage biological weapons program. The program that had, over the preceding decade, conducted experiments on human subjects across occupied China that would later be described by prosecutors at Tokyo's War Crimes Tribunal as among the worst atrocities in recorded history. These men were not being evacuated to safety. They were being moved to a new facility, somewhere the Americans would never find them, somewhere they could continue their work. Carter received a confirmation signal on March 19. The Tokushima Maru had been positively identified. She was running without escort through a narrow shipping lane, relying on the darkness and the assumption that American submarines would not risk operating this close to the Chinese coast. That assumption was wrong. Carter ordered battle stations. The crew moved without a word. The attack took 11 minutes. 2 Mark 18 electric torpedoes. The first struck the forehull. The second detonated in the engine room. Tokushima Maru broke in half and sank in water 4,000 feet deep in under 20 minutes. Carter brought Perch II to periscope depth and watched through the scope until there was nothing left to see. Then he turned the boat south and ran. There were survivors in the water. The crew of Perch II knew it. Carter knew it. The rescue of survivors was standard practice in the submarine war, a grim courtesy extended even to enemy sailors. Carter received no order to stop. He received no order to leave. He received no order at all. But the implicit message in the silence from Fleet Command was understood by every man on that bridge. They dove to 200 feet and made for open water. The men who had been aboard Tokushima Maru were left behind. No American vessel was ever dispatched to search for them. The wreck was never salvaged. The coordinates were never formally logged. And within 6 months of the sinking, USS Perch II herself was quietly decommissioned. Her crew scattered to different postings across the Pacific. Her patrol log for the period between February and April 1945 filed under a classification code that would not be reviewed for declassification until 1998. This is where the story becomes something more than a war story. Because the silence did not last. It never does. In 1983, a Japanese investigative journalist named Kenji Watanabe began cross-referencing Imperial Navy shipping records with American FOIA requests filed by a veterans research group in California. He found a gap, the same gap in both sets of records. The same 3 weeks in March 1945 where a ship, a crew, and a mission simply vanished from the paper trail on both sides of it. Watanabe spent 4 years tracking down former crew members of Perch II. Most refused to speak. 2 agreed to talk, on condition of anonymity, in a series of recorded interviews that Watanabe donated to the University of Tokyo archives before his death in 2001. Those recordings are the closest thing to an official account that has ever existed. They have never been translated into English. They have never been broadcast. Until now, what the men described, in voices aged by decades, but still taught with something that sounded like guilt, was not the pride of soldiers who had completed a mission. It was the hollow weight of men who had been asked to do something they were never allowed to process, never allowed to report, never allowed to grieve. One man, who had been a sonar operator aboard Perch II, described hearing sounds through his headset as the boat dove after the attack. The sounds of men in the water. Voices. He had logged the sounds in his personal notebook, a habit he had developed during his training. When the boat returned to Subic Bay, a security officer came aboard and collected all personal notebooks. The sonar operator never saw his again. What makes this story impossible to simply file away as a wartime tragedy is what happened in the years after. Several of the scientists believed to have been aboard Tokushima Maru were never confirmed dead. Not by Japan, not by the United States. 3 names that appear in Unit 731 personnel record from 1944 also appear, under slightly altered versions, in post-war Japanese pharmaceutical industry documents from the 1950s. The Americans had a program now known publicly as Operation Paperclip, in which German scientists with Nazi records were given new identities and brought to work for American research institutions. A parallel, quieter program existed in the Pacific Theater. Its name has never been officially confirmed. Its subjects have never been officially identified. But the pattern of disappearances and reappearances in post-war Japanese scientific institutions tells a story that American and Japanese governments have both, for 80 years, preferred not to tell. USS Perch II was sold for scrap in 1947. Her physical record, the boat itself, was gone before anyone thought to ask questions. The men who served on her final classified patrol lived their lives in the ordinary way. They raised families. They grew old. They took the secret with them, most of them, all the way to the end. But secrets have a weight, and sometimes that weight shifts. Sometimes a notebook surfaces in an estate sale. Sometimes a recording in a university archive finds the wrong pair of ears at exactly the right moment. Sometimes a historian in Osaka in 1983 notices that 2 sets of records have the same 3-week hole cut out of them and decides that the coincidence is too precise to be accidental. The ocean keeps its secrets better than governments do. For 1,000 feet of black water over the wreck of Tokushima Maru and whatever is left inside her hull is a silence that no declassification order will ever fully break. The men aboard her died unnamed in the official record. The men who sank her lived unnamed in the same record. And somewhere between those 2 silences, the truth waits, patient as the sea itself, for someone with the courage to keep pulling the thread. Because in the end, every war has two histories. The one written by the people who won, and the one that sank with the ships they never officially sent.